Hello, friends. My name is Andrew Sweeny from Parallax, and this is a quick plug for what we are up to and how you can participate in or support our activities. Firstly, me and Tom Amark are developing Parallax Academy. We have several fantastic new courses available, including ones from Layman Pascal and Brendan Graham Dempsey, and more to be announced soon. We also have a membership program that allows you to participate in live events and community discussions with some of the great people we've interviewed. Furthermore, if you become a member, you can participate in one of our study groups. And if you're interested in one-to-one dialogue, I offer what I call meaning coaching, which helps people connect to their own daemon, dance with the muse, and have a richer and more meaningful existence overall. To conclude, there are several ways to be involved in Parallax. You can become a member, which allows you to participate in live events and study groups and gives you access to past courses. You can take some of our courses. Finally, you can simply subscribe and like our YouTube channel or sign up for our newsletter to keep abreast of all of our activities. In any case, thank you in advance for any support or good vibes or participation in this project. And please join us and help us to rebuild spirituality, rethink philosophy, and reimagine culture.
Welcome to the Parallax Salon. My name is Tom Amark. This is the very first salon we offer from the Parallax Academy, which offers kind of educational content for members and non-members alike. That is, we're trying to rebuild spirituality, rethink philosophy, and refeel culture. So, and in that instance, we have, as our first guest, invited Pamela von Sabljar. I still hope I get that correct. So she is a speaker, a facilitator, and a mentor, and her work is very much concerned with and centered about evolutionary Eros. Very welcome, Pamela, that you're here, and thank you for coming. Andrew will host this evening, and we'll have a conversation about 60 minutes, I think, and then we open it up for question and for an open dialogue. Thank you, Andrew, for doing this, and here you go.
Let's go. Okay, hello, Pamela. So I guess we met a couple times. First time in Kiev, actually, strangely enough, and then the second time in Berlin for the Emerge Festival. And you've been a real presence in the Emerge community, and I guess you're doing a lot of things. And the big word that sticks out in your bio and when you're speaking about yourself is this word Eros, living from Eros. So I guess I want to ask you, the first question I want to ask you is, you know, maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about your journey towards that, coming to that sort of formulation, and then where you're at, what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for the invitation. And yeah, I think here was 2019, just before the pandemic. And then there was Berlin, like 1.5 years ago, approximately, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna like tune into your question. So your question was, tell you a little bit about how I came to have a close relationship to Eros and why that's something that I feel really passionate about. Is that where we're going?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that somewhere along my journey of exploring consciousness and my own, how do you say, I think Ken Wilber, he has this like almost like a slogan, like his pitch, like clean up, wake up and show up and so on. And through these different parts of my own journey, and I just come to a point where I became more and more present to life itself, and could start to notice that practicing my presence, I could also come in connection with the impulse of Eros. And Eros for me is another word for sexual energy, creative energy, life force energy, aliveness. You could also make it very simple and call it aliveness. So in what way can I be in connection with life itself? And by that, responding to these subtle impulses from my inner knowing, that I also, even if I say my inner knowing, because then you can have a mental image of that it's actually only happening within my body or within me with the boundaries of my physical body. And that's not my full experience. It's almost like I would say the subtleties from my inner knowing that is deeply connected to something that is so much bigger than myself and beyond the boundaries of my physical body. So it is like through life, because I usually say, I know this is a space for reinventing in philosophy, and I usually say, like, I'm not a conceptual philosopher in any way. I more have followed the phenomenology of life itself, like different events, different experiences, different insights that has taken me deeper and deeper into what I would call the mystery. And there, starting to make sense of the different experience that has kept on coming for years and decades. Mm-hmm. So where I'm standing right now, and not in any way that I don't receive that I am like, oh, I'm there at the goal line, I have all the answers around it, I understand it fully. It's more quite nuanced and deep, like understanding that there seems to be a force of nature, like a life force that is moving the whole evolution in universe. And if I and we, because we have that capacity as a group, as a collective, if we start to pay attention to these subtleties, like these impulses, we can actually be conscious creators and co-creators of the evolutionary process. And that is like what I'm passionate about, is to how can we bring Eros back into culture? How can we, like our modern narrative, or the story that hold the whole modern society together, it is based on separation, it's based on disconnection, and it's based on parts instead of like wholeness. And I'm just really curious of what would happen if we brought back a sense of generativity within ourselves, with each other, like the choices we do in society, for actually recreating a more regenerative society. So, yeah.
I was thinking today, are you familiar with Gurdjieff, George Gurdjieff, and his work, this kind of, Armenian mystic from the 1920s? Anyway, we run a kind of a Gurdjieff group here, and we've been studying his work, and he focuses very much on conscious suffering. And I think that, and I was thinking about this before I was going to talk to you, and I was thinking, this is a very masculine approach to focus on suffering, to focus on, and I don't want to, totally genderize this, but I noticed that the tendency of almost a more feminine spirituality would be toward eroticism, and a tendency toward masculine spirituality tends to be sort of and looking at your suffering and starting with the crisis. So anyway, I was meditating on that. So I wondered if that makes any sense to you, and if you have any reflections.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And one thing I get curious on when you say that is that if you would like to give a distinction point when you say suffering, like from the tradition you've been reading into, like what would you say is their approach around the suffering, and what does suffering mean? Just if you would like to give me something around that.
Yeah, so from the Gurdjieffian point of view, that would be mechanicalness, just being mechanical in one's existence. So it would be the false personality, or the facade, or anything that we do that is not alive. So in a way, it's the same thing as what you're talking about, because when we notice the mechanicalness of our existence, then something opens up for the real intensity of actual Eros, or actual life.
Mm.
So it's almost like coming at the same thing from a different point of view.
Mm.
So I would say suffering is when the worst kind of suffering is there's actual suffering, like pain, and then there's the pain of not being engaged and not being attacked and not seeing things and not being in the world, right? Living in representations, living in a simulacrum, instead of living in the real juice of life.
Mm. Yeah, and I can deeply relate, and I can relate both on a personal level, because I received that the first 20 years. I would say I focus on the suffering, like to really, what is the fake identities, what is like the different crises that went through my life, where I needed to like just plunge into, see what was in the way of me becoming more alive, and actually just having a capacity to be in awe and wonder for this amazing life that we have as available for us on Earth, like not wanting to be anywhere else or go anywhere else, and also just like having the capacity to be with my suffering. Like that took a long time of not trying to avoid it or suppress it, but actually be with the emotions and everything that comes with the suffering. And then also decode and reprogram of like, what is the false personalities and stuff that I put on myself to become safe but not alive. And then a little bit more than 10 years ago, there was a really significant shift. And I also receive that I can see it collectively, like that we have had quite masculine spirituality, if I'm using your words. And it seems that there's a wave of like bringing Eros back to culture, bringing us into the body, bringing us into the pleasure of being alive. It seems that that is actually what the world is needed out of where we're at in the crisis we're in the world. So that's also where I can see my client work has shifted, for example, and I can see what it does when we actually are allowing ourselves to focusing on the generativity, and from there, taking care of whatever is suffering, but starting in a post-tragic standpoint. That's so I don't see either off. I actually see them quite beautiful together, and I see the gravity point in, if I use your word, like the feminine, more spirituality of pleasure and body, and going from generativity and building that and choosing that and following the impulse of Eros and attuning your nervous system, creating a chemistry that allows your system to actually be more available to pay attention to these subtle impulses. And then from there, taking care of the suffering the crisis that comes from that, you enhance the generativity in your system and around you and in the culture or in the group.
Mm-hmm.
How does that sound like for you? What does that evoke?
Well, what I think about and what I think about a lot, because it's my major preoccupation, is the need for the tantric tradition to enter the culture in some kind of way, whatever you want to call that. I practice in a Buddhist tantric tradition, but there's various tantric traditions, and for me that doesn't mean a flattening out of, let's say, it doesn't mean a matriarchy or a patriarchy. It means that the feminine is powerful and the masculine is powerful as well. But there's a return in some sense to polarity, and a return in some sense to the dynamic polarity, and that kind of and that is sort of like moving from, let's say, sutric spirituality, which is very much about discipline and renunciation and cutting yourself off from worldly passions, to embracing the passions, but not in an intelligent and a sophisticated kind of a way. And I think that means the feminine is very present as well. It's not monastic. It's right in the center of things.
Yeah, and it's like I was at a monastery last spring around this time in France, Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh's Buddhist monastery, and like the lushness of that garden, it was like walking in like aliveness and beauty and prosperity. So even if the monastery itself was quite constrained and disciplined by food and touch and a lot of things that you maybe would look at is pleasure, but it was so present. If you would talk like the garden was the feminine, that was like it was so much aliveness in the garden, so much beauty and so much pleasure just by walking and smelling and touching like the different fabrics of the plants and so on. So I think that was also like a very beautiful, just visual way of seeing, as you're pointing at. I really, that is one thing that pulls me quite a lot right now, of like how can men and women show up together in full maturity, embodying both their own feminine and masculine, and totally being relaxed that we are different, we're not the same. And how can we play with the polarity from that place, and what is the possibility, what is the power that it can be harnessed in that polarity play. And yeah, just the small explorations and the innovations that I sit with for now is just that I can notice that but for example, when you work with like intersubjective dialoguing or emergent dialoguing or we spaces, or like John Vervecke's way of saying like dialogues, like when you create that space and bring in the feminine masculine polarity between men and women, it is like putting a psychedelic into the space. Like it alters your state of consciousness in such a profound way, and take us like it places in our consciousness that is like quite amazing. And I'm just like, and what could that do for our culture? Like if we talk about we're in a meta crisis and so on, like how much creativity can we generate together in that space? And I don't have any answers, but I know I have a lot of questions and curiosity to explore it.
Well, I was thinking when you were speaking about this beautiful garden in Thich Nhat Hanh Center, in a way, it's the polarity which allows. It's the emptiness, right, of this practice, which allows for the lushness to emerge, right? So if you're just lost in the sensual lushness of it, it would become a jungle. It would become chaotic. You couldn't see the beauty. So there is this like, there has to be sort of a balance of, we call emptiness and luminosity, in the tantric tradition. There has to be this, and that is what creates that kind of a richness, not one or the other.
No. And when you talk into that vastness, I think that's perhaps what I'm pointing at when I shared in the beginning that following these subtleties from my inner knowing, like they need to be in a container of vastness, not even a container, a space of vastness, because I have the experience that it's like I'm connected to a void, and that void is like beyond my humanness or my personality, and that's where I can pick up the lushness of life, like the impulses of life, and following them. And that's very much beyond my own identifications. And at the same time, there is such a, there's like two movements moving together, because it is also Eros, like the evolutionary impulse also finds me, like the evolutionary process finds me through my deepest desires. So that's how I have experienced so far that evolutionary process is talking to us through our deepest desires, and then having the discernment and the sovereignty to know what it was, like what is more shallow desires and what is actually deeper, and how does it feel when life force energy enter your physical body, and you can notice that the aliveness like increases, and having that as GPS of guidance of what is the next right step when you're navigating through life and leadership and as a group and so on.
Yeah. So what about practices. How do we practice this? You mentioned dialogos. I do different kinds of meditation, and other people do, yoga, and there's all of these different like techniques and things that people seem to need to do right now, because I think it's almost because of the super sensual nature of the internet. It just sucks you in and sucks your mind in, and so you need to do all these practices just for your own kind of mental health. Well, I'm just wondering, like discovering this aliveness, discovering this Eros within you. What are the practices, and what are the practices you do? If that's not too personal or
no, I'm just dropping deeper to see what's really here right now. One practice that I have had for many years is to be deeply every day connected to nature, like to be with and in nature, for having the possibility of just attune to it and notice that I am a part of something that is bigger and a greater ecosystem, and also just allowing nature to do what it does when we spend time in nature, coming into a sense of wholeness. So that is one everyday practice for me, and that I do every morning. And then another type of practice, and in that nature practice, I am practicing walking meditation, like to really pay attention to all the textures, the fabric, the smell, the different fields of energy that is in nature. When you walk around, there is tons of portals I receive. So just being there and being with it and being present to it. And then also for me, there is also an important of having a quite clear nervous system practice, so that I am in attuning to the vehicle that my body is. So that is in a space of generativity and not like too stressed and dead or numb or painful state. So for me, that can be everything from shaking and dancing and doing breath work, stretching, like whatever my inner chemistry needs to come back into an open and connected and present body. And then also meditating and working with my energy body and the energies around me. That's also, and prayer. That's also an important part of my practice. Yeah, and for me also, it is like a practice that's not like only morning or night. Is a living every day as much as I am aware of, choosing to attune to Eros, like to tune to, like if I'm sitting in a conversation, having a quality of presence so I can notice when the energy is shifting in the field between us. When I am sitting and doing emails or talking to a client, like, am I in a state of connection and asking for guidance in different decisions and so on. So listening for where do I come alive, and then take that into discernment of like, is this an alignment with values and purpose and so on. But like, that's my everyday consistently practice.
Yeah. So we're kind of like, a lot of people are sort of not religious these days, they're post-religious, and you also, but you also mentioned prayer. So like, I was curious about what people mean by prayer. What is prayer? What do you think prayer is?
I come from a Christian tradition. So for me as a child, like prayer was something that created a sense of being held. So somewhere I have that with me. And then I left Christianity when I was around 14, 15. And then I turned myself away from it for a very long time because I couldn't be with the dogma and the gap between what you pray, what you pray, but how to say, yeah, what you say and the difference of what you do. And then I've landed that pray for me is a ritual. Pray for me is a way of being intentional. Pray for me is also to both connect to my ancestors, because I pray for support from ancestors, the lineage I come from, everything that I'm standing on. And pray for me is also to ask for support for something that is beyond myself, whatever. And I don't put a specific word on that, but I do have a deep sense of its presence.
Yeah, you don't call it God or anything like that, but
no, I don't call it God. And actually also interesting, like the last year, I also been playing around with what would have, because I have noticed it's easier for me when I speak and like when I'm gonna speak into images or with people to create like a kind of common sense making or understanding. I can use like word as Shiva and Shakti. I can use word like from other tradition. And the last year I've been like, what if I just owe my background? Why if I just owe where I come from and the ground I'm standing on? Because these symbols, these rituals for my psyche and the collective that I come from do have a deep spiritual meaning. Yeah. So I'm also been playing around with that, and I found it quite liberating and fun and interesting. Yeah.
I think I'm experiencing something similar to you actually. Because I studied Tantric Buddhism for a long time, and now I'm studying deeply like Jewish mysticism and things like this. And some words in the Hebrew tradition are just so gorgeous. Like they call the Holy Spirit the Shekinah, and when you just hear this word, and it has this deep power to it. I think a lot of the Hebrew words and stuff like that are very, very powerful, and it's like Sanskrit or something. Like I was very attracted to the Sanskrit words, and you mentioned Shiva and Shakti and Prajna, and all these words have a spiritual potency and depth to them. But they're also present in the West as well, almost I think in the Hebrew and in different kind of more, let's say, hidden ways. So anyway, yeah. I wanted to come back to polarity and masculine and feminine because I'm very interested in this subject. I was thinking we had a men's group at Parallax. It's no longer there, but we did it for about a year, almost a year, and we had some women that came in and talked to us, and it was a very interesting, almost clash of cultures. The women were upset that the men were hyperconceptual, intellectual, and kind of like aggressive, and they were feeling it in their body, and they were getting upset. They're like, I'm getting a headache. I could feel it in my body. You guys are just so fucking conceptual. Come down to earth. And anyway, it was a very interesting experience. So I wonder, like, coming back to this kind of like how men and women can be with each other in this postmodern age where the gender polarities sort of have collapsed, and now people are sort of unhappy with that and trying to find them again.
Yeah, as I I laugh because I can so relate to what you just shared, and that's also part of my experience, both personal and in groups, and I also had a couple of these. Like I do. I'm one of the co-initiator of Nordic Women's Gathering. We gather a group of women, like between 1,500. We gather once a year to explore womanhood in the 21st century. And last year I could notice as a source keeper for it, I could notice that there was a very clear impulse of bringing men into the space for the first time in 5 years. So we did like an online series that we called the Edge Walking Women in 21st Century. And there was a similar clash you talked about, and it was so interesting, and I learned so much. And also, again, like going back to what I said before, like I think it's so important right now that we dare to start from the ground that we're not the same, that we are uniquely different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and that doesn't take away that we have psychology. Like I'm talking about the biological perspective that of course infuses all the other perspectives. But of course we're social constructive. We have a psychology that can be changed like out of our entire lifetime and so on. But daring to say we're different, how can we honor that? How can we work with that difference? And how can we deeply appreciate it?
Yeah, and I think one of the problems is this kind of like the resentment that comes along with difference. And also the focus on power. Like men are supposed to have all the power, and you know, women are supposed to have been oppressed since the beginning of time. And then I think there's a lot, I think Carl Jung was quite right that almost like what women have to deal with is animus, and what men have to deal with is anima. In other words, this might sound like a vast sweeping generalization, and people might get offended, but I often feel like the feminine anger towards men and the male kind of men sort of becoming feminized, and this kind of like we have to discover that in ourselves. We have to figure that out. We can't just go off into the polarities. Am I making any sense here, or?
Yes and no. Like you're using two definitions, like the you said, did you say Freud or Jung? Freud, right?
Jung had this theory of like, okay, the anima is the hidden feminine within every male, right? The repressed feminine.
Yeah.
Like the push down feminine in every male, and that animus is the push down masculine in every female. And there's a powerful animus, right, in a lot of feminism. It's anti-male or something. And then there's, and then the anima would be men afraid of their own manhood.
Yeah.
And sort of becoming being unconsciously dominated by the anima.
Yeah.
On both sides, right?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not so well known with the concept that you're sharing, but I understand from my point of view. We just use different words, but to the point, yes. And I think that's like one of them. Like when you describe, oh, you're so conceptual, yes. And that is also very much the beauty with a lot of the masculine capacity or men's capacity, because it's also like, the distinction point with men, women, masculine, feminine is not the same. Like we do have masculine and feminine. Sometimes it's easier to talk about them as energies, like yin and yang energies. And then we do have different biology out of that. We are men and women. And we both have feminine and masculine energies within us. And most often, not always, most often, they sit a bit different depending on if they are in a female body or in a male body. And then we also have like the third circle and when I call third circle, it is around, we also have the fluids. We have the one who walks in between. They are in male bodies and female bodies, and they walk in between, and they had a very specific role in the tribe when we were living as a tribe. And I can notice that they have also now when the groups I'm in, where we're playing a lot with like the polarities and the men and the women, and trying to find a different navigation point together that is beyond the postmodern culture around gender and sex that we have today. So all these three circles, as I see it, women need to come into a right relationship with themselves. Men need to do the same. The fluid ones need to do the same. And we need to come into right relationship with each other. What I receive is somewhere there in the middle, there seems to be a very, very potent technology. And that is what you said before, polarity. And I think we miss something quite crucial. And I also think out of the times we're in, that this wants to come forward. Like, it's almost like I can notice in different groups that I'm in, like globally, like it's like that consciousness is pushing the edges of wanting to come into right relationship. And also and then that needs to be, I can see that there are so many women, for example, who can't be with healthy male aggression. Like, their nervous system can't be with it, because most of us in our society today haven't been exposed to healthy male aggression. For me, that's sacred. Like, it's so important. And also the difference, for example, between how men communicate, if I'm generalizing, of course, because we also have to do that to be able to talk about it, how women communicate. Like, it took me quite a lot of effort to reprogram my nervous system so I could be with a room of men who are like in a communication where they actually in war with each other, but they're not having a fight, but they are like power measuring with their arguments as they were throwing a spear. And the power measure with the argument for them is healthy, because for them it's like, I can feel you, there you are, and you're standing next to me, and you're telling your truth, and it's hard, and it's like it's like that. And that is a way of saying, I can trust you because I know what you think. And that's quite different.
And you can trust somebody who's able to have a handle on their aggression, right? Whereas you can't trust somebody who can't handle his own aggression, or who's pushing it down, or is behaving in a kind of a passive aggressive way, which a lot of us do. And being from Canada, I find like Canadian people are so nice all the time, and it's like, and then I notice like this kind of combative world of where the philosophers are very almost edgy and rough with each other, but then they forget about it. They don't hold on to it. Like that's there's something healthy about that we're kind of, we don't want to be, we're kind of ashamed of that or something in this culture, I feel. This like a basic combative quality, healthy combative, healthy sort of martial arts in the sense of healthy combat. Men really need that. I think. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, that's also my perspective and experience. And then there is also, like, I can also like turn that around. I can also see that there is also a non-verbal language that many women are attuned to. Like, if we talk about women and the feminine, women are more attuned to the relational field at the gatherers, sitting around the circle. Me able to read the relational field kept my baby alive if I died, because as many like connection points I made relationally, there were more like that someone cared for my offspring. So many women are really powerful and attuned to like, what is the subtleties that is not like verbalized. And I also been in groups with men and women where there are more like you could call even if both men and women are engaging, but if you're more mental fast and like you're throwing like the conversation around, you can lose voices, like really important voices that are more subtle, that are more nonverbal, that are more physical, that have a high sensitivity of like picking up dissonances in the space or listening like beyond the veil, so they can actually hear something that hasn't come into like creation yet. And if we don't give space like to that more, like you could say, if I'm referring back to your example before, like the more embodied conversation, we also lose important voices.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. So and I can see that also, like both in it doesn't matter if I speak to a group of men or I speak to a group of women, that is also a quality that is needed.
Well, I don't. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No,
I interrupted you. No, I'm thinking of like this term mansplaining, and I don't like the use of that politically. But there is something like about men that they get hyper conceptual, and they need to be brought down to the earth. Like they tend to live in their minds and disconnect from their bodies, and that's the sort of neurotic. That's a kind of male neurosis. It's just being hyper conceptual. And living in language, living in just concepts, living in this like fantasy world of language. It has a sort of autistic flavor, right? And conversely, like in the alchemical tradition, they talk, or like in inner tantras, they talk about the white dot, which is up here, which is the masculine. It gets frozen, it gets stuck. It's supposed to be lunar, and then whereas the feminine is this blazing fire. And it gets lost in extreme emotionality, right?
Yeah.
And it needs the cooling masculine, and it just as the masculine needs that hyper conceptuality to be tempered, to be formed. And so that's why, in a way, how we need each other. It's just like the alchemical chamber is incomplete without all the ingredients.
It's a very beautiful way of to say it. Yeah. And also there, like what I see also for many women, it's really to step forward in this conversation and not excuse themselves or waiting for someone to give space. It's like, oh, we need to throw in some music now. Like when it gets too dry, too fast, too conceptual, too mental, like when it is not because it's wrong, just because it's not serving. Like, how can I show up with my presence? How can I show up with inviting in more aliveness? And how can I do that without needing to be invited?
Right. Yeah. And there's also, I was talking to somebody about this before, and there is a way that the feminine needs to be invited as well. I've noticed, like in the podcast space, guys just go in, and do it, right? They just, it's overwhelmingly male, right? And then to invite somebody to come, a woman like you, it somehow I'm not saying you personally, but it seems like that there is a way in which women have to be invited. Does that make any sense? Or maybe this is what women need to do, is jump in and not be invited. But
I think most likely it's not either off, it's both and.
Yeah.
Like as the same as I see that, like men allowing themselves to really have these conversations where they are powering measure each other with their different perspectives and allowing that and seeing that as sacred and important, and equally being sensitive enough to notice if there is a voice in the room, no matter if it's a man, woman, or a fluid, that is not spoken, and invite that voice in. And as much as I can adore that conversation and see like the truth that comes into the room and the alignment and then conceptual and the clarity and the discernment and the distinctions, and really noticing how I become more alive because there is more truth in the room, and then also stepping forward when I notice it becomes too dry or too mental or too conceptual. So I receive, it's not either off, it's both and. I think that's as many times like holding that paradox.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the question that came to me as you were speaking was a question of like women in power. What is power, and what is power for women, and what is power for men, and in the positive and negative sense. In one way, I can notice the first impulse that comes up is like, I don't know. And then I can notice like the next thing that comes up is like the curiosity of like an inquiry that I've been in the last couple of months, this year, is just like, what is the
the how do you say that in English? Pivotal, is that how you say it? Like the primal, the really like the pivotal power of the man or the masculine. Like how would we word that, and how we would word it for women, like the feminine.
Yeah.
I'm quite curious on that, like how, yeah.
Well, I mean, there are the kind of archetypes, which you can look at. Fanny, I was talking to Fanny, and she had a nice theory. I thought she said there's a receptive male and the active male.
Mhm.
And the receptive male is more like priestly. He's powerful in his presence,
Mm.
And I think of sort of, what do I think of? I don't know, Christ or something. And then there's the warrior male who is powerful in his sort of nonverbal action, just going out there and making things and doing things and engineering things, and that's kind of, so the power of, that's the sort of the two sides of power in the masculine realm. And she also said that there's a receptive female and an active female. And she was making the point that in the West, or in our culture, we tend to not honor the active female, the fierce female, the let's say the Kali type of archetype. We tend to do the Madonna thing, or just do the Madonna or whore, and so that fierce sexual feminine is considered a whorish, or instead of something being like, very alive. So maybe we're growing out of that feminine whore kind of dichotomy in terms of female, and so it's not feminine whore. It's more like active receptive, or something like that.
Yeah, and also last time I talked to her, she upgraded it, and she worded as the creative feminine and the holding feminine, and the creative masculine and the whole and the holding masculine and the creative masculine.
Right.
Yeah, and that, like, the creative feminine is, you could pull the archetypes of like the witch, the seductress, the sorceress, and then the holding is more like the mother, the sage, and so on. And for the creative masculine is like the warrior, the one who gets shit done, and the holding masculine is more like the priest, or the king, and so on. And I think she's really onto something really good in it. And I also like this really like power. I don't know if I speak into like your original question, but like if you look at what is the pivotal or really primal force or power of the man or the masculine, is that to die, like to actually die or protect for something that is bigger than himself. Like, and how is that honored? Like, and that is a kind of like deep aggression. Like, that is really deep aggression. And and you could call that like Kali energy. Like, how is that sacred, or is that really in our postmodern society? That is really what we are, how do you say, pushing it down. And in time of crisis, what do we need? We need men with healthy aggression that will say, I am willing to give myself over and kill and be killed for life. And what is the primal, pivotal like force or power of the feminine? Is that she is life creating? I don't know fully, but I can notice that if I look into like the tantric tradition, you can see that, that stream in the feminine and masculine, like the protector of life and the life giver. And also how do we care for these parts in us, in our society today? I don't know if I have any good or clear answer on it, but I can notice that I have an urge to really like allow us to explore it and keep on talking into it, and really like bring all the new essence around it.
Yeah. I think there's so many passive aggressive men, you know, and angry women out there. I mean, that it would be so nice if, you know, if men could you know, find ways to deal with their aggression, and you know, there would be a way for let's say that to be appreciated on, you know, and again, I think I sometimes I'm afraid I'm offending people when I make these vast categorizations. It's interesting. I was like,
I'm like, Andrew, you probably are.
yeah, I mean, that's okay. That's okay to a certain extent. That's to a certain extent, but I am afraid. You know, I'm not without fear.
That's okay. It can be the suffering of the day, can't it?
Yeah.
But I also, like, I don't know, but like, what is it that makes you bring up the question of power? And also, I also wonder, like,
Oh,
yeah, like if you go for, like, we started at a bit like Eros. How is Eros in our society today? Like, as I say, like, what would happen if we brought Eros back into the culture? In what way is that connected with female and male anger, rage, or passive aggressiveness? Why is that important for the times we live in right now? Like, yeah, I just wonder how they are connected. Like,
well, the first part of your question, I was thinking about your website, and I was thinking about how you present yourself as empowering women and that kind of thing, just powerful women who are, you know, in the business world and that kind of thing. And so I was thinking what that would mean. And then but I was also thinking of the corruption of power at the same time. Because my question was two parts. What's the positive meaning of power, and then what is the negative meaning of power? And so I think for the masculine, the negative meaning of power is just tyranny, right? Just being a tyrannical, you know, dominating sort of being, and going into, you know, indiscriminate violence. And that would be the negative power. And then I think the positive power in the masculine is often about presence, just being present and taking the blows and just being there, and also just being, yeah, and there's the creative aspect as well. You know, whatever you say about it is a limitation or a reification of something, but there's more to say always. But so
and how would you?
I was wondering, and so that was like, that's sort of obvious for men, right? In a way, what the positive power would be. It would be like I think something to do with wisdom and discrimination, and then what is the? And I wanted to see if you would articulate what the positive and the negative power of women would be.
Like the first thing I was like, I was curious to. That's why I interrupted you. It's like, I wonder what you would say if you describe the woman. But I could start. One thing that comes to mind for me is that I see this power women have, that you could have a very concrete example when a mother is connecting to her newborn. Like, there is such a deep capacity for receptivity, like to be connected to the other, like to read these subtle impulses, like both using her instinct, both using her this really primal instinct, but also her intuition, also like her whole and psychology and how her brain is wired, like to have this capacity to sense like the subtleties of dissonance and what's needed. So actually be able to read you could say the bigger ecosystem, if that's the tribe or the family or the relation between the child and the mother. And that gives, I would say, immense power of knowing what goes on in the field. Like, so in the positive sense of power is that a woman's capacity for receptivity make her very attentive to the dissonance so they can move into more harmony, but also how she can use the dissonance to create more disharmony, depending on if she want to create harmony for serving the wholeness and everything that's in the thriving of the wholeness, or if she wants to use the dissonance to create more chaos and more rupture and more for getting what she wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. I was reading something from Ivan Illich, who was talking about how traditionally, like, the women would go down to the well and gossip. And I always thought of gossip as a negative thing, you know, gossip. We always think of gossip as a negative thing, but gossip is also how the tribe is kept together, how we decide what is right and what is wrong. And you can destroy a life through gossip, but you can also keep the harmony through just saying, okay, we don't want this anymore, or this is so.
So like, I learned actually this word this week, feminine cunning. I think that's the right word, you know, like, you can seduce the other to more wholeness and harmony, and you can seduce the other for serving your own purpose. And that is not in service of harmony and beauty and prosperity, for example. So,
so a negative form of seduction sort of thing.
Yeah. Manipulation, like,
yeah. And I was thinking about seduction too. That's another really good topic. I mean, I think the most powerful masculinity is not seducible, like at some level. Like, it can't be seduced. At the other hand, it's extremely seductive, right? I'm just trying to think of really powerful men that I know, and they won't be seduced by anything. You know, even if
still they need to be able to play, or else they are dried up.
Yeah, exactly.
But they no, so yeah, it's like
they have both going on. They're not seducible, but they're also able to just be joyful and play with existence, but they're not seduced by it at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a true turn on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's a true, as a woman, I would say that's a true turn on, because that's such a deep, like, that's safety. That's all, that's safety, and that's knowing that it's so deeply trustable. So like I would say like the really deep part of the feminine, that's what she really wants, because that's trustable, and that like she is in service for the wholeness, like to create more harmony, if it's healthy. So a masculine part that is that as well. That
Yeah, and I think the mistake men make usually often is to try to be seductive or something, or try to play the woman's sort of game of being seductive, and then they end up being the woman's friend instead of, you know, there's a very powerful, but then men need to learn that over and over again, and then finally I don't know, in my experience, and a lot of men I know, we learn that over and over again, and eventually we learn to hold, you know, find our ground or our presence.
Yeah, and also in one way, like what comes up for me when I listen to you now is also like this: when we melt. Like I stepped into grandmothering last year, so I now, like, in my life journey, I have had the pleasure to become a grandmother, and in that I have noticed like a deep initiation and a rite of passage. And for the first time, I would say in my life, I have been aware enough to actually pay attention and show up for that rite of passage, and have had the right support around me to allow that to really penetrate my psyche and my, like, be open for spiritual emergence in it. And it's also interesting to see, like, the sage, like the crone, the grandmother, these archetypes was like noticing like the masculine and feminine, like coming into a union within, like to like what you describe, like the man or the masculine that cannot be seduced. Like that's deep integrity, and that's deep
integrity is the word.
Deep integrity, and noticing like that deep integrity that has come that of, I am now like the whole, like I have two generations like in front of me to care for and serve. Like I have walked along my life path, and I have a certain amount of days or life force energy left. Like how do I want to get how do you say what do I want to do with them? So also noticing like how I am alive and in my seductor, and I'm in my very integral masculine. So there you could say, in a way, it's almost like the feminine and the masculine is blended in together in a third thing.
And age too, yeah. I mean, I
But
guess
also,
guys, men, when men get older, they kind of grow breasts, and they start to get softer, the muscles fall off, and they become more feminine. I noticed that actually. I lived in a monastery for some time, and the older women had beards, and the guys were extremely feminine. So, anyway, sorry, I'm joking away what you're saying, because I think it's very important. I think it's what's very important is, like you mentioned, grandmothers, and I don't know, I somehow think that grandmothers are a big key to the culture at the moment. Intuition, but
yeah, and also, like in this, like what I was also speaking into is like when I can see this like through the grandmother archetype, but also through the initiation in my own life journey, is like when the feminine and masculine actually are coming into union within yourself, deep integrity and a capacity to be seduced by life and seduce life. So there is again, if I place it back into where we're at in society right now and what seems to be needed, it is leaders or people showing up in deep integrity for the values and what they believe in, and at the same time not be blown away by the suffering of the world and not ignore it, hold it with open hand, and at the same time being seduced by life, being awe and wonders of life, allowing life to do its thing. So holding this again, the paradox between the suffering and the radical hope of being truly alive. Like,
That's where we started. So that's a good place to end, perhaps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So we come up to an hour. Maybe we'll bring in some questions from our friends. We have Nils and Tom here with us still. You want to jump in, Tom?
Sure. A little bit more light. Okay, so Pamela, what I was thinking about and what I wanted to ask you, so is about, let's say, the ebb and flow of Eros, right? And so, because I think it's a kind of spectrum, on one side, it's something that you can harvest in yourself through the right techniques, but sometimes it seems as if it comes from outside, like as a grace. You can see it in relationships, you can see it in businesses and projects where sometimes something takes hold of you, right? And you don't know what it is. And then it's gone after a while, because everything has an ebb and flow, life and death. And so this whole thing is a spectrum. So I was wondering if you can say something about that, about this ebb and flow, about, where the difference is between that's my responsibility and maybe it just happens without me doing anything. It's like, okay, because you said something like, okay, we have to bring Eros back into society, in our culture. So, but how much can we do it? How much are we graced when it happens? Just so about that kind of difference, maybe you have some words for that.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for the nuance and the distinction there, because for me, when I use the word bringing Eros back to culture, is really about allowing yourself to pay attention to the grace. If I used your word, the grace, like when it comes, and follow that and allow that to take you, like to surrender into the moments when you can notice it. So for me, it's not so much about, oh, you need to do this and this and this. It's more about how can I be in life so I can show up for that collaboration.
Right.
So, and also, again, thank you for bringing in the ebb and flow, because it's also, if you look at animals, they're not like 24/7 or even 12 hours a day active. Like it's not about like believing that you act on Eros like every single moment of your it's really about rest. It's about play, and the imp will come. Then it's about action. Then it's about showing up. And then you can notice, like on a personal level, that you are so full of Eros, that you're so generative for the moment. And then you can notice that you contract, and you can notice that there is nothing. And then you are with the nothingness. You're not like hunting anything.
Right.
But you are taking care of your vehicle so you can pay attention again when it comes back. And I do also see that there is a responsibility as an individual and as a group to like say, Eros is about aliveness. If I feel dead, numb, in pain, in tension, what can I do to show up, like for becoming more alive? So it's not, again, like either off, it's both and. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. I mean, I was thinking about this recently, you know, what growing up means in a kind of sense. And in a very basic way, it just means to know when you have to, well, contract and be silent and just observe and do nothing and be overwhelmed by all these kind of things that, you know, are, you know, that you don't see if you act. But then on the other side, you have to know the exact moment when to act, how to act, and with which kind of intensity. And I think growing up means to know when to do what, you know, because like, okay, so just step back, just observe, just see what happens, you know, learn something about yourself and the systems you're in. But in other moments, they're just, okay, now swift and strong action is needed to give the system a kind of push and to align yourself within these, you know, let's say greater systems you're embedded within. I think that's in a very simple way, it means just growing up, you know, and I'm always fascinated by that.
Yeah, and it me personally, it's taken me so long time because I do have a beautiful sensing capacity, so I can pick up impulses that lays quite long into the future. And then my, I would keep on speaking these terms, my immature masculine have just like, or my mental mind just like, whoa, like that. And I just came out of right timing.
Right.
And still, I'm still practicing, and I think I probably will practice for the rest of my life in it. But I've noticed that the right timing and alignment, and with the other systems around, and like with the wholeness, like again, the whole ecosystem, it's such out of importance, and that is just like just keep on failing, and and then you notice like, whoa, this is the rhythm. And then there is also techniques for, speaking to the oracle within yourself to really.
Exactly, because it's not just the social systems around you, the ecosystem, because it's also you know, about the choir you have within yourself, and to hear like, okay, which voice do you have to listen to now? You know, which voice, which impulse do you let out? You know, there's like a whole inner cosmos you have to align yourself. It's like, I think we're like constantly over challenged with all these kind of complexities we're dealing with. And it's like, it's so easy to make just mistakes and missteps and, oh no, shit, maybe I should have just shut up or whatever. And, you know, it's like, yeah, I know this feeling.
Yeah.
I was thinking while you were talking, if you don't mind me interjecting here, is like there's like the jungle, which is, we think of aliveness being a jungle, but there's the desert is also alive as well, right? Just these empty times where there's nothing, and then there's times where you're in action. So I mean, I'm not now 52, and I guess like you move into more darkness as you get older. You move into the darkness a bit. You're not as generative, but you're more contemplative, and you're more. There's an aspect of that. So. Which is, it maybe not Eros in the same sense, but I don't know if that makes any sense. I was also thinking about like relaxing and chilling and the difference between like the society today, it's like either you work really, really, really hard, and then you just vegetate and watch Netflix or something. But we've forgotten how to chill or just be or just like hang out with not much going on. And so that's an important part of Eros too, this kind of languid, kind of like lazing, just being.
Yeah, but it's also like building capacity of pace is like really having that the way I navigated it in my own company is really about, oh, for 3 days I shouldn't do anything. I should actually just like be out in nature and waiting for like that impulse of like, there it is. And then I should really act. And then maybe I'm doing something for 2 days and quite a lot of time, like 10 hours a day or something. And then there is again, so it's so much getting a total different way of navigating to how to act, how to respond, that's a process in itself that most often we do not get that taught. We don't have role models on it. So it's really, for me, it has been very much of finding my way of like, wow, this is the work paced. This is how I need to show up again in the process of it. And I can notice even when I put words in it, I'm not clear enough because it's so subtle. But it's really about, it's not working 8 hours every day exactly the same way, but it's really like paying attention to when should I do what, how should I do it, and what should I do? Yeah, go on. You want to say something, Tom?
Yes, Pamela, how do you conceptualize that very impulse? Because I mean, I have this discussion with Andrew all the time in our podcast, The Parallax View. So it's like you have a problem, you have an issue. It doesn't really matter what it is, relationship, business-wise, and you don't have a solution, right? Mm-hmm. Your mental mind doesn't have a solution, and then you do something else. Let's say you do a meditation, and you do a meditation, and you just let go, and in that moment you let go. If you let go deeply enough, then it happens. And then everything is there, from somewhere, like an impulse. And that's the path, that's the way, that's, the way how to move the earth in a kind of way. But as long as you don't separate yourself from it, it can't come. And so you have to find a method for yourself to distance yourself, to let the system tell you what it wants in a kind of way. And so how do you conceptualize this impulse? Because does it come from you, or where does it come from? Where is it? Is it inside your head? Is it out? It's like, how do you conceptualize it?
My experience is that it doesn't come from my frontal cortex.
Right.
It doesn't come from my rational mind. I would say it's almost like it's not coming from within, and it still can have a sense of coming from within. It's more like I get this like a story, Hans and Greta, I don't know the English word for it, but they were taken by the witch and they were throwing some small stones or breadcrumbs. So it's almost like, there it is, there it is, there it is. Like, as you say, maybe I'm going to write a text, and there's nothing that comes. And then I get an impulse like, oh, I should call that person. And then I call that person. And in that dialogue, suddenly half of the text is written. And then another person, I go and I feel like, oh, I need to go and buy some food. And I go to the store. And then there is a person there. And I hear a conversation between two people. And I get another perspective that is to that text. So I receive there is so much synchronicity that is available for us, almost like, yeah, there it is. So it's like it's like a weaving of, like, I know it's going to be something, a sweater, we say, but I don't know the pattern for the sweater, but I'm listening to and allowing the impulses come up and the pattern to show itself for me. And that is like allowing myself to weave and bring and pick. So short answer, I do not receive the impulses comes from my frontal cortex.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I receive it comes from something beyond. only my own body human experience, and it has a pattern, and it has its own life.
Right.
Interesting. The
I mean,
word
it's a little
tantra
bit cheesy,
means to
but you know,
weave. Sorry to interrupt here.
No,
I was just saying, you said the
just-
word weave, and I just wanted, this is a footnote, I'm sorry to interrupt. But that means, tantra means to weave, so I thought that was interesting. That's your whole methodology. Sorry, Tom, please.
No, it's fine. No, I had a similar cheesy comment, you know, just, you know, because Eros as a god has like these wings and, you know, with an arrow. And so when it shoots, I mean, it's a symbol for people getting and falling in love, but it's like the idea behind it is just, it's just this creative thing, this evolutionary impulse. And when the arrow is shot, you know the path in the kind of way.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. And I receive that when the outcome is created, it's created in a way that I could never figure out myself. Like it's beyond my own rational mind capacity.
Right.
Intelligence and the profound, like the way it is arranged, and with the timing and the flow of it, is like, that's an intelligence beyond me. I showed up for it and I co-created with it, but I'm not the creator in a way. And at the same time, I am.
Yeah. And we all know that we can't really do it on our own, with our own machinations, right? In a sense, like if we just try to construct something through our own processes, thinking processes, it doesn't work, right? It's always there's always a process of surrendering that mechanicalness, getting rid of it, and allowing for the, I guess, the Eros to arise.
Yeah, I receive it so much. Getting out of the way.
Yeah.
Deeply listening, being receptive, and getting out of the way, and then daring to step out in the unknown, and feeling the awkwardness, be able to hold that, knowing the discern, just discern, so you not get like lost in that awkwardness, and making it more real than what you actually are surrendering to.
I also like the fact that it's essentially nothing new. The terminology has changed. But if you look at, you know, old books, you know, when it's talked about the seers, you know, that have sight or vision, and the duality of the vision and the voice, you know, so it's like we now have different, more modern terms for that. But this very capacity, which was always like kind of in the domain of the shamans and the healers of the tribe, to, you know, be at the margins and to see and to formulate a kind of, you know, goal or vision for the tribe as a, you know, as the capacity of the shaman and the healer. I always find that historical trajectory very interesting, because it is a sight, it is a vision, you know, that has nothing to do with the immediacy of your surroundings in a kind of way.
Yeah, that's also quite interesting, because I received that in my early 20s, and also in my when I was around 10, I could channel like information that wasn't available for me, and it wasn't available around the community or culture I lived in. And then years later, I could read a book and I could notice like, wow, this is actually existing, or this is how you did it, and I just knew it. I could just have a vision, and I could just know it. And then I just could notice really deep in that, even if I'm really scared, I'm just going to do it because it's true. So the vision was already alive. And then I noticed a very clear shift also when life took me on a journey to explore my feminine deeper. This vision went away. Like that capacity went away. And then it came out of more these very subtle impulses, more like, so I didn't get this, oh, this is a 10-year vision and I'm having that direction point, and then it will keep on unfolding in a very synchronistic way. It changed to become more, here's an impulse, and so it's more like stepping on the edge of the unknown in a different way, but still it's unfolding by itself. So I also thought that has been quite interesting to notice the two difference, as I would say, to go back, Andrew, to what you said before, like a more masculine and maybe more feminine way. And maybe it's not, but that's my interpretation for now.
Do I understand that correctly, that you just described it as a kind of circle? You started out as a young woman and had these kind of channeling visions, and the more you matured in a kind of way, the more you try to integrate the masculine, but at the same time, the visions got initially like weaker, but now that you're like on the other side of the curve, you know, they're getting kind of, you getting to the point where you can do it more consciously. Is that what you're saying, or?
No, I don't think that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying,
okay.
I'm just sharing my own experience, and maybe it's just mine and not valid for anyone else. I'm just really humble for that as well. But like, I had a very clear capacity to channel visions, and then like walking in that direction for maybe 10 years, and the vision came alive in a still a very
now I get it.
definitive way. And then something shifted, so my capacity for channeling vision like stopped, but the capacity of really sensing subtle impulses, like more from like day to day, and noticing like a very, like you could say, a hidden pattern, but more taking me on a journey of needing to be in the unknown, of not knowing, and practicing that capacity really, really deep. And now I receive that I'm a shift again, or maybe these two will melt together, but I don't know yet. But I've just noticed like two different ways of engage and relate to what's present, even if it's not seen by the eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if this clairvoyant kind of quality or ability is more ordinary as a state than we would think, that it's just been blocked by industrial culture, by this very mechanical way that we've been forced into these blocks of time and behaviors, and
Yeah, and maybe that's a really good way of saying it, Andrew. You know, when we talked before about the pace, you know, what is to be active? Like, we are taught to be active in a very mechanical way. Like, you do that, and you do that, and you do that. You should do it a certain amount of time. But to rewire a non-mechanical way, actually becoming a process, like allowing yourself, like, yeah, we are a process, and we are becoming, and following that, and really listening carefully. Okay, what's here? What's now? And I think that's a beautiful way of saying how to show up in creativity or in business with a non-mechanical way, like a being, a process.
Yeah,
being mechanical when that's what is, but we're most often better on that than allowing the process to be and following that and becoming that.
I wonder if Nils has a question. We have Nils in the house. Are you there, Nils?
I'm here.
Do you want to jump in with a question?
Yeah, I really love having this sneaky position, but I also appreciate you inviting me for a question. I will struggle to be very coherent, but some of what's been on my mind is let's see, I'm just gonna find another. I feel like
Nils is on the move.
Nils is on. I feel, to me, Eros is this knife's edge. You know, I don't know it very well. I haven't studied it, but just from listening to different people talking about it, it's this knife's edge. And when you said, Andrew, that the grandmother felt like a key persona or key archetype in this time, that something clicked for me, because it sort of, I can get the connection to some type of Eros that is, you know, where I don't have a sexual conflict, where I don't get into conflict with my sexual persona. So that grandma energy, which still has this Eros, but not getting into sexual conflicts. And well, these are just some ramblings on my end, but it feels deeply meaningful to me because I feel like this Eros is a sort of spirit worth pursuing. But it's all very new to me, and it's this knife's edge again for me because it gets into that sort of sexual conflicts, and I'll just keep that very vaguely. But these are some ramblings, and now I shall be quiet.
Yeah, and that is probably another conversation. But you are pointing, Nils, at something that I think is so interesting, valuable, and important. Like that sexual edge that very often comes in when we start talking about Eros. In what way do we distinct Eros from our own more primal sexual energy? Yeah. And how they are connected but still separate.
Yeah, I wonder if you age, the Eros becomes more imaginative or something. It becomes more rather than so as physical as it used to be. We have to keep being connected to the physical, but like for the grandmother, and there is something very physical about being a bit older. Like, I'm 52. I don't know how old Pamela is, but you're already a grandmother. So as we age, it's an interesting thing to think about what our relationship to Eros is, I would say.
I'm 49, and
you're
I can
a young grandmother. Yeah,
and I can notice that I can't really, for now or yet, relate to your perspectives around the quality. If there would be a quality of difference in the Eros, I would be a quite interesting exploration. So I will bring that with me.
I just had today a conversation with a good friend of mine who is also like a tantra teacher, and so we were talking about the difference of having like a mystical union with everything in meditation, or if you actually find some partner with whom you connect on all levels, where these kind of things happen in a similar but completely different kind of way. I was telling him I had a girlfriend, and we were just lying on the couch, clothes on, everything, and that was mind-blowingly that was a mystical union. And in a way, because the body and the physical Eros was involved, that was a whole different quality than just blocking the body out in meditation. I mean, you can have ecstasy and samadhi and all the bliss that is kind of attached to these meditative states, but to have that in when the profane and the sacred, the duality and the non-duality, if that in this reality all comes together in a kind of way with a partner, with Eros, that's a very interesting experience you can have, right? And I'm always fascinated by these shades of bliss, let's say.
Yeah, bliss is like the key thing. Yeah. In a sense.
Yeah, and also when you mention Tom, like also the mystical experience you can have with intimacy of sexuality, also with yourself, and if you call it Eros or God or the mystery, exactly, can be deeply profound. Like, right. But there's also about, as you say, it's the wholeness that's involved. actually having the sense of being fucked by life,
Right.
or say God, or the mystery. Like, I have had experience where that I definitely define as mystical. And I'm like, wow, I get the nuns. I get, I'm like, wow. So also, and it is a different experience from the bliss experience in meditation, for example. Not as the one is better or worse; they're just different
Exactly.
qualities, and also living life with that erotic turned on, no matter what conversation or workplace. Like, yeah, I don't even think we have started to sniff the potential of what's possible there.
Right.
And I could just notice I'm curious. I'm gonna just keep on exploring it as long as I still are breathing. I guess it's just like, yeah, I'm already several times like taken and blown away of what seems possible.
I just fear, and this is like, I don't know if you know Christopher Ryan. He's an anthropologist and psychologist, and he's like good with wisdom and stuff. And so he says, the problem probably is that the moment you understand really what's going on, that's the end of it. He referred to it from, the testosterone aspect of things, but it's also, it's like, if you understand the universe, it will collapse and something new will emerge, and that's also like an aspect of Eros, this new kind of thing, and the old thing,
learning how to die, right?
Yeah.
That's part of that's a whole other conversation as well. Geez, we've covered so much ground here. Pamela, is there anything, maybe, do you think now would be a good time to round off the conversation? Because it's 9:30. Is there anything you want to just say to our Parallax Academy audience, and or about what you're up to, or to leave this conversation with? Anything you want to kind of close us off with?
I just would like to bring the invitation that like the inquiry of what would happen if we allowed ourselves to dare to ask the question, what will turn us on, what will lit us up, what will allow us to become more alive, like together as a society. Like I'm just curious on that. So I'm just leaving that in the middle of the room and allow that to be a part of our conversation.